We continue our conversations with the 17 candidates on the ballot for Denver mayor. Aurelio Martinez, welcome to Next.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm glad to be here.
This is your first run for elected office. There's a good chance folks watching don't know you. What's your 30-second story? Where you're from, what your deal is?
30-second story is I just let everybody know that I lived in Denver all my life, 5 Points, Curtis Park, and I'm still there. Raised my family there, have kids, have grandkids, and a great-grandson. So I'm homegrown.
You got into this race because you wanted Denver's neighborhoods to have more say in the development process. Are you a NIMBY guy? Are you a not in my backyard kind of guy?
No. Actually, I'm proud of my neighborhood. Back in the 80s, I ran the neighborhood organization. Well, I was president, and it was called the Curtis Park Block Council back then. So I'm very familiar with the troubles and the problems that neighborhood organizations and residents have working with the city. It's always like pulling teeth, and it's continually got worse and worse and worse. And today, it's almost impossible. They just ignore the residents, they ignore the neighborhood city, and they ignore small businesses. Denver needs a lot of help.
If they're ignoring the neighborhood organizations, they're ignoring the small businesses, who is the city listening to?
Very pro-development, developer, and it's becoming a concrete city, and that's what we don't want. We want to save our neighborhoods the way they are. You have neighborhoods like Curtis Park, single-family homes, all over the city. And we don't want them to suffer. We want Denver to stay Denver. We want it to stay beautiful. We want it to stay an icon city. As a matter of fact, that's something I tell everyone is my goal is to make Denver the icon city of the United States. And you have to bring the neighborhoods and the residents and the small businesses. I mean, they suffer. I just met with the group that has a small business, a bakery in Capitol Hill. They've been there 8 years with their small businesses, and they yet to be able to take a draw from the small business because they can barely make ends meet. But they don't get any help from the city.
Does Denver need more housing? Do we need more people here?
You know, we need housing, but it has to be the right housing. I mean, if you take a look at all the development that's going on, a lot of it's luxury apartments, and a lot of them are empty. But yet you still hear that we need more housing. The truth of the matter is we need more housing for the medium income people. That's who we need to target, not only so many units or a small percentage, 5%. We need to do that type of development that's going to keep the people in Denver and also bring people back into Denver. People that work in Denver can't live in Denver, and we need to fix that. And that's what we have to do. That's the type of housing we have to focus on.
How do you get that housing built if the financial incentive isn't there for developers?
Well, the city can make incentives, and they do now, but they don't tie these you have to do this, you have to do that along with it. If you look at the developments, even in Curtis Park going toward the Pepsi Center, you see that they vacate streets, they give land away at pennies for the developers to do what they're going to do, all for 10% of the houses to be affordable. And when they say affordable, that alone becomes a problem, Kyle, because affordable, if you take the numbers that they use for affordability, a couple making $100,000 a year can qualify for one of them affordable units. So who gets the units? The couple making $100,000 or the couple that works at Walmart making $35,000 a year?
So what percentage of affordable housing do you think we should be asking for developers, and where would you peg that at AMI, at the median income?
Well, it can stay similar to where it's at, whether it's 10% or whether it's units, but it has to be defined. It has to be clarified that they don't use the numbers that they use in affordable housing, that it has to go to people making, let's say, $45,000 and below. That's who it has to be designed to do. And it's not easy to do, Kyle. It's not, because most of the people that make the $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year won't qualify for a loan. So that's where the city has to get aggressive to help pitch in and help do their part so that they can get into some type of home ownership.
Do you want those homes built in Curtis Park?
No. That's why we have zoning, and that's been a big issue with neighborhoods. that they have with development coming in. They come close to the neighborhood because the land value is lower and their profit margin goes higher. Zoning laws are there to protect the neighborhoods, to protect the small businesses. That's what it's in place for, the zoning laws. So what they do is they buy land. Take, for example, one of the big driving forces with me was a large development acquired land from Volunteers of America on Lawrence Street, right on the border where Curtis Park begins. And they needed a PUD to put their 5- and 7-story buildings up. So we fought it. We fought it aggressively, okay? Went to the planning board. They didn't listen to us. They just passed it, just like we weren't even there. Went to city council. City council passed it, all but one city council. So now they haven't started the construction, but now we are faced with 7-story buildings kind of hiding our neighborhood. We live in a historic district neighborhood. I mean, it's beautiful. People come in just to look at the homes, the Victorian homes. And we're going to be buried. If we allow this to happen, we're going to be buried. We're going to be just a buried neighborhood. So,
full disclosure for anybody who's watching the full interview, you mentioned Volunteers of America. My wife previously worked for them.
Okay.
No longer does. So you said city's got to have this affordable housing, but not in your neighborhood. I mean, that is the definition of not in my backyard. So you're saying it's because your neighborhood's historic and it should go into neighborhoods that are not historic?
Well, no, because it's zoned residential and it's zoned for the neighborhood, and the neighborhood has a neighborhood plan.
Zoned single family.
Single family units.
Yeah,
okay?
most of the cities zone single family.
Yeah, but there are business zoned land where they can put these high-rise developments. It's not like Denver doesn't have the land available. It's there, but it's more expensive. But to save the Denver as it is, you have to adhere to the zoning laws, and they have to be able to do it. It doesn't mean that the city, we can't give them incentives as well to make that happen in a business zoned area or an industrial zoned area, wherever they're able to build their high-rise buildings. There's room. It's not like there isn't land available.
You've talked about the fact that you believe that when developers come into an area and they build with some density, that traffic and parking get worse. There are other candidates in this race that have actually talked about lowering the parking minimums to allow developers to put in more units with fewer parking spots. Do you think that people have the right to park in front of their homes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That should be a given, that you should be able to park where you live. I've always said that your neighborhood where you live has to be your safe haven. You have to be able to come home. You should be able to park in front of your house. You should be able to sit on your porch without the worry about traffic noise, about crime or anything. It has to be your safe haven.
Is that an effective subsidy for car owners? That the city would then guarantee you this space to store your car in front of your home on the city's property? Is that a subsidy for car owners?
Well, it is, but I don't know if that's possible because, usually homeowners, people that live in a house usually have 2 or 3 cars, so most homes are on a single lot, which gives you one parking in front. So if you have a daughter or a wife or husband that also drives, chances are you have 2 cars. So it gets complicated just with the residents that live in the neighborhood, much less people coming outside the neighborhood parking into our neighborhood. So
does that essentially then kind of, and maybe this is your goal, is to kind of freeze Denver neighborhoods in amber, in the sense that we're not going to take away parking for folks, we're not going to upzone for density. Is that your goal, to preserve neighborhoods as they are?
Pretty much. We need to preserve our neighborhoods. We can't have the negative impact that the high density buildings bring, just like the one that's going up on Lawrence Street. It could be in any neighborhood. Okay, you're going to have an increased parking problem. You're going to have an increased traffic problem, and you're going to have an increase. They have to bring trucks and stuff to service the development, the stores, and whatever they have in there. So it becomes a big problem and a nuisance to the neighborhood, and that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen to anyone.
You've described downtown Denver as ugly and filth. What do you mean?
Downtown Denver, you have to remember, I've lived here all my life, so I remember when they first did the 16th Street Mall. And man, it was beautiful. We'd go out there, people would come in from the suburbs just to sit down on the 16th Street Mall and enjoy it. Now it's a scary place. You go in there, you have to worry about if you're going to be burglarized, if you're going to be anything. It's scary, so people don't go downtown. And the impact it has is the businesses downtown can't survive because they don't have the clientele. They don't have people there. So part of my platform is to revitalize the 16th Street Mall so that people come back to this and clean it up. And everything is intertwined. It's ugly. A lot of that is because the encampments. A lot of that is just because the city allows the property owners to put these huge big boulders and rocks and stuff on the city right of way. And it's become a very unsightly place.
What would you do in terms of homeless encampments? Would you forcibly sweep or clear encampments?
We wouldn't do sweeps because we wouldn't need them. With what I have envisioned, what we would do is we would put together an encampment enforcement team. Okay, I call it the EET, and what that does is that's a separate group of folks that would just go through the central business district, neighborhoods, and they would stop the tents from coming up before they start.
So you're saying you wouldn't sweep encampments because you would not allow them to go up in the first place?
Right. It's all about enforcement and how you enforce it. People say, well, you enforcement, you're being inhumane, but the key is you stop it before it happens, and that's what this team will do. That's their job, is to stop the tents from coming up before they come up. So to give you an example, they see someone pitching a tent on the right of way. They stop. You can't do that. It's illegal. You can't pitch a tent here. You have to pick it up and you leave, and then they will direct them to the nearest shelter or wherever they can go for safety, to be safe. They would direct them and also give them a ride if they need the ride.
So we know from surveys of people experiencing homelessness in town that they overwhelmingly want housing, but they don't want anything to do with the shelters.
Right.
So then what do you do if you say you can't put your tent here, go to a shelter? And we know that the vast majority of the folks surveyed won't go to a shelter. They don't want it.
And they don't. And sometimes you just can't blame them because they don't want to live in the streets, but they don't want to live in a shelter. I mean, it's just something that has to happen. And I'm not understanding why other people can't see this. There is organizations out there that have assisted living for homelessness, for people experience homelessness. We met with Greg Whelan that runs some of these. He has units, and one unit he has eight homeless people that live there, and they stay there until they can get back into society. They get jobs, and it works very well. But his problem is, he says it's very hard to get these things permitted by the city of Denver to do this, and that has to stop. We have to be able to provide assisted living for people experiencing homelessness.
What's the name of this model that you're talking about?
Right offhand, I don't.
Because I've heard you reference this before, and I'm curious how it differs from everything that the city is currently doing. Why you think that this one model is working better? Well,
because it gives them a home. It doesn't give them a shelter. Shelters are not the answer. Okay, they really aren't. I've been asked that before. They'd ask me, so you think we don't need to build more shelters? And the answer to that is no, we don't. Because if you build more shelters, then what you're doing is you're putting logs into the fire. You're encouraging, in a sense. So shelters aren't the reason. They says, well, we don't have enough shelters, and that's not right. We do. You can open up the Denver Coliseum, and you can fit all 8,000 homeless people in that one building. So it's not that we don't have enough shelters. It's that we have to find a better way to help the homelessness. And this assisted living is by far the best way that I've seen to actually help them.
And one issue that's confronted all the candidates in the race is what happens if your street enforcement team, encampment enforcement team, comes upon somebody and they're not willing to go into the shelter or the treatment provided. Will you arrest people under the urban camping ban just for urban camping?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You can't arrest somebody for not breaking the law. You can't.
Well, the urban camping ban is the law.
Well,
and some of the candidates in the race say that they would arrest people for that.
Well, and I've heard that, and that's nonsense. You don't arrest them. You just stop them from that. So what you do in that case, the team would say, okay, well, if you're not going to move, we have to clear your tent. So we will clear your tent, and it will be taken to a storage area where you can reclaim it later.
I mean, that is the literal definition of the sweeps that are happening now, but you said you're not going to do sweeps.
Well, but the sweeps now are blocks and blocks because there's so much.
You're talking about picking people off one by one.
If they refuse to remove their tents.
Yeah.
Because you can't do that. So that's the enforcement part.
Okay.
That's the enforcement part, is if they don't pick up and leave, then we have to pick it up for them because you can't. So basically, we aren't criminalizing them. We're criminalizing their tents. Okay, get it out the way. You can't sleep on the sidewalk. So we take it, put it in the storage, the city storage. They have a certain amount of time to go claim their belongings, but they can't sleep there. You stop them from sleeping on public right away.
It sounds to me like your team would be doing a smaller version of what we're doing now, which is just chasing people in circles around the city.
Preventative maintenance. You're stopping it before it starts. Because what happens now, the city waits, and now they have blocks and blocks and blocks that they have to do the sweeps. And that's when it becomes a problem, because now they have to clean up, and they have to clean up the garbage, they have to clean up the mess, the needles, whatever it is, and it becomes unsanitary. So we don't let it get to that point.
Aurelio Martinez, thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Kyle.